In this video we're going to add a new tool to our process library in ZebraCut. The process library defines all aspects of how cutting is configured for the various tools on our machine. To access the process library, you need to go to Advanced on the ZebraCut ribbon, and then you can choose to open the process library. Now you can see I have a very sparse library here. I only have one process defined, so we want to try and add knife cutting to our process library. To do that, we need to define the knife tool. So we're going to go to Tools, and you'll see we only have pen and crease tool defined. So we're going to add a new tool. I'm going to call it drag knife, and this is going to be a Genesis V knife tool, and I need to select the tool number from the list. So this is just going to be SP3 knife, and I'm going to give it a nice bright green colour in Rhino. That's the information about the tool set. I now need to tell ZebraCut what kind of configuration this tool requires. So being a knife, it's very important that we set the cut heights correctly. We also need to ensure we set the speeds correctly, so we're going to turn on cut speeds as a required configuration. And finally, we need to set the lift angles so that we ensure we're not turning the blade whilst it's cutting in the material, otherwise we'll break some blades. I can also give a list of optional configurations which we can use on a case-by-case basis. So for this we're just going to use chamfer, fillet, and sometimes you might want to do some blade adjustment to account for things like overcut and undercut. So there we go, that's our knife tool defined. Now let's create a process which uses that knife tool. So let's go back to processes, and we'll add a new process, and we're going to call this knife cutting for card, and we're going to make sure we have some information about this. So 200 GSM card rapid cutting. Now we're going to select the drag knife tool that we defined earlier on, and you'll see we now have 3 different configurations to set, and these are required configurations here, and you can see our optional configurations are down here. Right, let's work through these. So cut heights, I know that my card is about 2 mm thick. I have quite a short blade on this, so I just need to lift by 10 mm, and I want to cut 2 mm into my card to cut all the way through. If I wanted to only score the card, then maybe I set this to 1, but today I want to cut all the way through, so 2 mm cutting. If you're ever confused about how these cut heights work, there's a nice diagram and explanation of how the various parameters work together to define the lift height, the material height, the cut depth, if you're routing, the pass depth and the final pass. So you're welcome to explore that diagram. You can always access it through the question mark. There's also help on every individual parameter if you just hover over these question marks. So that's our cut height set up. Now we need to set up some cut speeds. So I'm just cutting cards, so I'm going to cut pretty rapidly. We'll cut at 1200 mm a second, and I've got my lift speed, and I'm going to set my plunge speed to be nice and fast as well. So that's our speeds. Finally, our lift angles. So what I want to do is make sure I get a nice clean cut. So I'm going to make sure we've got a nice low lift angle. So we make sure we lift the blade out of the material before turning. And I'm going to set the dwell angle as well to a reasonable figure, so that this will bring the machine to a halt before it tries to turn whilst the blade is down in the material. So those are our 3 required configurations. That's our new process for knife cutting defined, and you'll see it's already appeared in my list of processes which I can then assign to the various layers in my job. Now we spoke earlier about optional configurations, so I want to explore this by looking at filleting. So I'm going to create another process. I'm going to save some time by just cloning the process. Now this is going to be filleted knife cutting for card, and to add the filleting I'm going to go to add configuration, fillet, add, and now you see I've got my options for filleting, and in this case what I'm going to do is just enable filleting and give it a nice large 10 mm radius on any sharp corners. So there we go, there's a new knife tool defined and 2 new processes using our knife tool. I'm going to make sure I save the library and close this. Just in case we forget, we're going to save the library. And you'll see I can now assign these to the different layers on my job. So if we preview this, you'll see we get through and we get a preview of the cut. I should have said. Here we have the library. This is a very small copy of our process library. These ones are read-only, so you can't change the library from this screen. However, once you paste it down onto your job, you can then adjust that for this one specific job, and that's just adjusted per job once you've pasted it on, indeed per layer. Right, so let's have a look at our filleting. So let's paste on filleting onto our 2 layers there, and we're just going to go through and preview this. And what we should find, if we zoom into the corners, is we've now got a nice 10mm fillet radiusing every one of these corners on the rectangle here. So that'll make for a much more rapid cutting because we don't have to stop, lift and turn the blade to continue. So there we go, a very brief overview, a rapid introduction to editing your process library, adding a new tool, adding a new process, and then defining optional configurations. Hope that's helpful, and look forward to helping you again.